Thanks to Baron of Dice, Grey Matter Gaming, and Monument Hobbies for sponsoring this video. Dark Angels have slowly emerged as the strongest Space Marine faction over the last few months, with Deathwing Knights proving to be one of the game's most durable and troublesome units. But for all the power Dark Angels bring to the table, their detachments have been largely ignored in favor of those in Codex Space Marines. For Lion, the Rock Johnson enjoyers, this has been a bit of a downer, especially for those players looking for a reason to bring Ravenwing units to the battlefield. That might be changing today with the Lion's Force Task Force Detachment. As usual, you can find a written companion to this video on goonhammer.com, link in the description. Detachment Rule in the Lion's Claws. Enemies within engagement range of Ravenwing units must take a Desperate Escape test every time they fall back, at a -1 if they are also battle shocked, while Deathwing units get +2 to charge any unit that is within engagement range of one or more Ravenwing units. This detachment builds on the classic dual wing archetype, emphasizing the use of Ravenwing and Deathwing units over standard Marines. The problem is that most Ravenwing options aren't great in melee, and you'll need to carefully coordinate them with your punchier Deathwing units to get the most out of these rules. Taking small units of Outriders or Ravenwing Knights to set up those Deathwing charges is gonna be what you want to do here. The 4 enhancements in this detachment are absolute fire, without a dud in sight. The damage boost from Calibanite armaments is always welcome, and going from 2 to 3 damage is a huge improvement. It's a great boost for the Terminator Captain's Relic Fist, and a fine upgrade on the Ravenwing Champion's power weapon. The real value to Lord of the Hunt is disengaging and re-engaging, which is helpful for those times you need to set up another Deathwing unit for a shorter charge. It's limited to the Ravenwing Champion or Chaplain on bike, but it's good to keep your bikers moving. Stalwart Champion is useful for holding objectives and preventing steals with your Deathwing Knights, and when you pair this with the Terminator Ancient, you're suddenly pulling the Grey Knight's trick of having OC3 Terminators. You could also put this on a bike chaplain to get OC3 bikes, making them credible objective flippers. Fulgus Magna is an absolute windmill slam into the list option, and a genuine must-take. Being able to drop back into reserves and deep strike again is huge, letting you reposition a unit anywhere on the board, and double dip with the detachment rule to pull a 7-inch charge against a unit that's already within engagement range of a Ravenwing unit. The stratagems on offer here are rather good enough that you'll absolutely want to include Azrael to get the extra command points to use them. It's a fantastic set of stratagems, giving you the kind of utility that can actually compete with the Gladius Task Force. The timing on overpowering extraction is what makes it interesting. Used at the start of the fight phase, it's an okay way to try and prevent interrupts. Firing this off in the command phase, it's a great way to try and steal an objective from under your opponent's feet, or potentially setting yourself up for an action on an objective you otherwise wouldn't be able to control. This is super versatile, if a bit unreliable. Armor of Contempt needs no explanation. You know it, you love it, every Marine detachment has it, and it's always good to have. Strength in Unity has some weird wording. It's a debuff on the enemy unit, not a buff on yours, meaning that you're basically picking a unit from your army that was the target of some of those attacks to not be eligible for Armor of Contempt. So if you had a Ravenwing and a Deathwing unit in combat, you could pick the unit taking fewer hits, then use Armor of Contempt on the other one. Either way, this is very good, and even if you only have one unit in combat to get half the benefit, you can still pop this and use Armor of Contempt on the other unit. Knights of Iron is incredibly good for shoring up one of the big weaknesses of Ravenwing units, letting them stage behind cover for a charge through a wall, protecting them from tough shooting until it's time to strike. Also note that based on the timing, you can roll your advance or charge roll before opting to use this stratagem. Illuminating Fire is a neat idea, but Deathwing infantry units don't have much shooting to write home about. You'll want Land Raiders, Dreadnoughts, and Repulsors with the Deathwing keyword to take advantage of this. Inescapable Wrath is pricey at 2 command points, but can still be impactful for when an opponent wants to steal an objective from a Deathwing unit without getting stuck in. Drop the cost to 1 command point with a captain, and countercharge anyone trying to take your objectives or get cute with positioning. This is a dynamite stratagem that makes your objective holding units an absolute nightmare. If you're playing this detachment, go ahead and write down 3 units of 5 Deathwing Knights in your army list, plus Azrael, then start working from there. Your biggest challenge here is going to be getting the mix of Ravenwing units to Deathwing units correct. Ravenwing aren't generally great from a datasheet standpoint, but they're going to be a key part of getting the most out of your units in this detachment. To that end, it's worth remembering the units that gain the Deathwing keyword when you take them in Dark Angels. In addition to Terminators, your Blade Guard, Stern Guard, and Vanguard units become Deathwing, as do Land Raiders, Repulsors, and Dreadnoughts. As we've already mentioned, Land Raider Redeemers and Dreadnoughts can benefit tremendously from abilities like Strength and Unity and Illuminating Fire, and they've got good synergy with the units you're already taking, since Redeemers can transport your Deathwing Knights. When it comes to which Ravenwing units you want to take, one of the big keys to this detachment is the Knights of Iron stratagem. When you don't have to keep your models out of ruins that might otherwise stop them from making it up the table, you can get a lot more out of your bikes, safely staging them behind walls before they plow through on the charge. This makes Ravenwing Knights and Command Squads much more playable, though it's also worth experimenting with the Ravenwing Flyers, as they're capable of zipping 20 inches up the board and getting into combat in a single turn, though they're probably too expensive to work along with speeders. Your goal here should be to have 3 to 4 Ravenwing units available to power your best unit rules and give you a little redundancy, then fill out the rest with Deathwing. Let's look at the strengths and weaknesses here. It makes Deathwing Knights even better, strong enhancements make your army even more versatile, and the ability to move Ravenwing units through walls when moving or charging shores up one of their biggest weaknesses. On the other hand, Ravenwing datasheets just aren't that good, and this detachment often requires them to be in combat to get the full effects. Deathwing don't have great AP in melee, and this detachment doesn't help with that. There's no ability to charge after advancing, the notable exception being Samael, or making a fallback move without the Lord of the Hunt enhancement. While it's not entirely clear whether this detachment is going to be better than the Gladius Task Force, there's absolutely enough power here to make it worth testing. Deathwing units, Azrael and Knights in particular, were already plenty playable in Space Marine armies. The real question is whether this is enough to make Ravenwing playable too. On that note, we think there's definitely enough juice here to make a go of it, and if you're a Dark Angels player looking for a way to run the army with a Dark Angels exclusive detachment, this might be the best option out there. If you'd like to read even more tactical analysis and check out how we're planning on running this detachment, head on over to goonhammer.com and consider backing us on Patreon for access to our Discord, early event tickets, and more. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Baron of Dice, Monument Hobbies, and Grey Matter Gaming for sponsoring this video. I've been Calibanite McLionel Johnson, watching you in the dark. See you next time.